That's not the easiest thing to do, because once she hits a certain threshold, she gets locked into... Whoa! Our damage output is just completely insane. Hello everyone, and welcome. Today we'll be doing a Kokonoe 75 Transcendence run, and boy do I have a build to show you guys. This build is almost certainly going to get nerfed in some way, because it is completely breaking the game right now. So most of these things are standard, expanded foundation, potential discovery, discount I use on every run, and then acceleration is also something I use on most of my Transcendence runs. I also don't need any chance boost for this because we'll be going into a variety of different tactics, so none of this would really help me too much. So I've taken Curse to Boon in that slot, and then I also don't need any type of defensive Mind Crystals at all. So instead of that, I've just taken a little bit of extra boss damage. For Transcendence, I've also been starting to take no damage reward and speedrun reward as starting buffs. I don't like to abuse these too much, especially because they get very expensive. I would have wanted to be able to exclude fewer rewards from here, but it just didn't show up and I ran out of money. The reason why I'm taking extra money into Transcendence is that you can see on the right side on number 2, you get an extra store refresh count. So, hey guys, post-commentary Fury here. So I think what happened here is that when I closed the Transcendence menu, I accidentally hit the deny button instead of the confirm button, which means that Transcendence doesn't turn on here even though I thought it did. Unfortunately, I'm going to be mentioning Transcendence throughout the entire run, because I thought it was on that difficulty, and I didn't notice until the final boss was killed. However, this was still a very good run, and I didn't want to scrap the commentary that I did, and I especially didn't want to scrap how powerful the build turned out towards the end of the run. It's one of the most crazy runs I've had in quite a while. So just bear with me as that happens, and keep in mind that this is not a Transcendent run, it is a normal run. So, in order to actually use that store refresh effectively, I need to be making a lot more money, though. It's hard to spend enough money to use 4 shop refreshes, unless you're getting like a black market or a covenant that's helping out with it. So we'll be running Attack Shadow Mark, Shadow Chain Tether, Legacy Electric Pillar, and then Shadow Chain Electric Pillar. Shadow Marks apply on enemies as you attack them with attack or skill Shadow Mark, and then they share some of the damage taken. Shadow Chain Tether makes them all get pulled together anytime you damage them this way. And then what Legacy Pillar and Electric Shadow Chain Pillars do is that the Electric Pillars will come with their own Shadow Chain. It also gives you the ability to damage them. So I can damage the pillar and damage a bunch of enemies. But more importantly, when the pillars are getting damaged, and this will even count, they'll just damage themselves constantly, they're going to constantly trigger the Shadow Chain Tether and pull enemies directly into them. So here, if I put it down and I mark a bunch of enemies, you'll see they all get suctioned into the pillars. And this actually makes the pillars quite strong. I don't really like using the pillars without this, because they tend to... For one, they knock away enemies on their own after a certain amount of hits, but usually it's just very difficult to keep enemies in them in the first place. Unless you're using something like Rachel's Wind Attack that can push a lot of enemies together, either just from playing Rachel or using her as a legacy skill. That's one way to kind of clump enemies together, but otherwise it feels pretty difficult to keep enemies in the electric pillars. But this just completely solves that issue. And then at the same time, this, the ability to be able to attack the Shadow Chain Electric Pillars is going to completely break Ragna's second legacy skill. I can't really show it off now because I haven't taken any damage, but by the way, I want to make sure and get the additional duration here. That's the one I care about the most for upgrades for this build. There might be some other builds where maybe one of these others can come into play, but most of the time I've always been taking the duration on my shadow or on my electric pillar builds. But back to what I was saying before. Anytime I'm hitting a pillar, I'm also able to get the healing of Ragna's legacy skill. I swear I took that damage on purpose, just to be able to show it. It was not bad gameplay on my part. Anyways, so if I'm hitting both a boss and an electric pillar, for example, I'm suddenly just able to heal double the damage output and that I would be able to normally. I'll show it off after this room ends, because there's also something else that's broken with these. And then also, on top of being able to basically, like, duplicate the healing amount you're getting out of the Legacy, we're going to be going for a summon tactic for Radiance, and Radiance will also spawn 2 of its own electric pillars every time Radiance spawns. So we can have up to 4 of these down at the same time. So here, if you see that, I'm going to wait for the cooldown on my Legacy skill to come back up, so I can put 2 at once. So I can drop 2 of these pillars. Well, this game's weird about sometimes the pillars just do not work. But anyways, you can see that even when I'm between a room and I'm not even fighting anything, I can just drop these at any time and heal off of them with Ragna's second Legacy skill. So basically, I just have a free med kit I can drop at any point of the run, including during boss fights. And by the time I get everything down, where I have the extra summon pillars, it's going to become very, very difficult to die. Unless I get just very extremely bursted down from full HP or something. Ragna's second Legacy skill was already very broken as it is, and just having a way to multiply it by 4 times at any point completely shatters it. I don't want any of these. What I'm going to be looking for dash tactics are light element. It doesn't really matter what we take in the skill slot, but I will probably save the skill slot for, there we go, skill cold. If we're going to break the game already, we might as well throw skill cold in there too. So for the Shadow Mark upgrade, I'm almost always taking Shadow Mark multiplication. The damage transfer you get out of these 2 are the same, and this one allows you to mark all the enemies a lot more easily, whereas this one does allow you to mark a couple extra. So if you have an easy way of spreading marks to begin with, you could go for this one. Otherwise, you could do this. I think the detonation is also fine. It's just not something I don't really care about the damage for this particular build. I mostly want the marks to get spread as fast as possible. That way everything starts getting pulled into the electric pillars. So basically we've turned the electric pillars into almost like a black hole, except they're dealing significantly more damage to enemies than the black holes would be. And then also, the damage amplification, or the damage transfer for the attack Shadow Marks is quite low. I don't think they're too useful, just kind of on their own, but when building them into other builds, they seem to scale pretty decently. Another thing to mention about that... One second. We can go ahead and take this. Another thing to mention about the damage transfer of this is that if I'm hitting, like, 3 enemies, for example, the damage will get multiplied based on how many of the enemies I'm hitting. So if I'm... Let's say I'm hitting a boss in 2 pillars, he should be taking 2 extra damage sources from the pillars. Now, it's a very low amount of bonus damage. It's like 10% if you manage to get everything maxed out at gold with the base and the upgrades. But we'll be able to get that up to a 40% damage increase in total by having up to 4 pillars out at once. So just having basically a 40% damage increase on the boss fight at full potential when you have all of the 4 pillars, 2 from your legacies, and then 2 from the radiance, it'll give you a 40% damage increase to bosses, which is not bad at all. And this is also 40% of your actual final damage that you're dealing after tactic damage and stuff, I would assume. But it also transfers the damage that tactics deal, and then... yeah, that's basically it. The way that it is transferring the damage is a very efficient way of transferring damage. It's hard to explain what I mean. I'll give another example after I pick the tactics. Ideally, what I want to be looking for early on is the jump upgrade that generates splashes. There we go, perfect. This upgrade is just insanely powerful in general. So what I mean by, like, the efficiency of the damage transfer of Shadow Tether and stuff, or the Shadow Marks, is that there's 2 different ways that damage increases are calculated in this game. So for something like Frost Skill and Frost Attacks, that say they deal... I'll show it so you can see it. So this says you deal an extra 30% damage increase, but the damage increase you get there is considered before any other damage multipliers that you have. So it's only considering the base damage that the move deals. So basically what that means is that the damage you're getting out of Frost will never scale as you go throughout the run, and you get stuff like the potential damage modifiers. If you didn't know, every time you pick a potential, there's a 20% scaling damage bonus that you get, and it just stacks throughout the run. So your character ends up dealing a lot of bonus damage by the end of the run if you're buying a lot of potentials or stacking a lot of potentials. And then meanwhile, that bonus damage you're getting off of stuff like Frost and Radiance and Mind Crystals do not actually scale. Whereas since the Shadow Chains are transferring the amount of damage I deal, they're most likely actually scaling with my damage modifiers and stuff. Unless for some reason they're only counting the base damage dealt, but that would be weird. It's something I might have to do some more digging into after this. But either way, even if they're scaling off of just base value, they're still pretty close to they'd still be pretty close to the damage bonus you're getting out of stuff like Frost and Radiance. Plus, like I said before, you're getting the whole healing amplifier from Ragna's Second Legacy. And then also the Legacy Pillars themselves can do okay damage, especially when their constant DPS is also getting amplified by hitting multiple targets as well. I could start going into some components. I would like either the Seeking upgrade or the... Yeah, we'll take it. The Seeking upgrade or the down plus skill lasers will be good with this build. Since everything is just getting pulled into the pillars constantly, it's easy just to drop the down plus skill lasers or the up plus skill ones once they have the homing and kill everything at once. Well, we can stack max HP, but we should probably just go for damage. We still want to increase the max HP, probably through some shops, so I don't get one shot. But other than that, I don't need a whole lot of defense for this run. We're still not seeing any light tactic spaces, which is unfortunate. I guess I could take, no, I don't want Umbra Dashes here. I want Holy Marks, and then I want the Summon Radiance as well. Yeah, we can take this. Nothing else that we can take there as an option. So let me just take... I'll put both the pillars down and let them deal their damage. You can see they actually kill enemies quite quickly, as long as the enemies are in range of it. Also, just having the splash upgrade on my jump attacks makes Kokonoe more than powerful enough to easily clear through the early stages as well. A lot of people have issues with Kokonoe's early game, from what I hear, and if you just look for the splash upgrade early on, that should basically solve any problems you have early on. What you want to do is just do jump attack into dash in the air, and then the dash attack in the air will also do the same thing as the jump attack. The amount of extra damage hits it deals, and then the actual damage output of it are both very high. So not only does it keep enemies in hit stun constantly, but it just melts through most enemies. Even in the end-game boss fights, these splashes still continue to generate a high amount of Kokonoe's damage output. So even if you're going for a full skill-based build, it's only one tactic that you have to pick up, and then I think there might be one more tactic that makes them deal more damage, but even then... not tactics, sorry, I mean potentials. I think we'll go for... I'm actually going to try and just boost the Mark's damage transfer as much as possible. Even though it's not very high of an increase per ascension, it should add up by the time we start hitting multiple targets with it. And then I'm going to mostly prioritize exchange points, unless it's a light space from now on. Well, exchange points and potentials. Like I said at the beginning of the run, with the extra shop refresh, you can spend a ton of money throughout the run, which is a huge benefit because you can get your upgrades a lot more easily that way, but it's just, you can never have too much money in a Transcendence run. At least in high Transcendence, where you have up to 4 refreshes, or you have 4 shop selections total, 3 refreshes. 2 from being at, it's around 75, no, it should be right on 75 entropy, is when you get the +2 shop refreshes, and then 1 additional one for being on Transcendence. Yeah, we are really not lucking out with the light spaces. Hopefully, if we get the double tactics from this, we can get some light tactics that way too. Oh wow, we are already at the end of Stage 2. So we'll have the boss fight right after the shop. We're clearing through this very quickly, it feels like. Oh, we might as well keep updating, or not updating, upgrading the Heaven's Judgment lasers. I usually don't buy anything from the shop unless it's on discount or it's a potential, but in this case I do want to stack a bit more HP. And the reason why I want to buy more HP is because of the black market taking so much away. Susanoo is capable of doing at least 3,000 damage in a very short time frame now, if not even more than that. So I definitely want to go in there with an HP pool of at least 3,000. Because even though I can heal quite a lot, I still have to watch out for burst damage potential. And now we can start grabbing whatever we see between components and the down plus skill is what we'll pick up next. And then also, if I see the potential for additional damage on the splash attacks. We could try to go for this one. It's not something I really use too often, but we shouldn't be needing HP mixtures for healing, and I wasn't planning on buying more of them either way. So just having them for extra damage will be helpful. They give you quite a lot of MP regen, which I think will be the main thing that'll help out for boss fights. Assuming I remember to even use them. And then I guess we'll go event here. Since we have less time on the timer, that's something I'm going to have to consider. If I go into a room like an event, or a shop, or a sortie show, this game is really not giving me light tactics. But anyways, if I go into like an event, a shop, a sortie show, that type of thing, any stage that doesn't require combat to do, your timer doesn't tick down at all during that, and then it still progresses the stage counter normally. So if you ever want to save time on your time limit from the entropy settings, you can just go into a non-combat stage. We should have actually been taking an electric stage a lot sooner. I was thinking that I needed to fully upgrade Radiance in order to get this, but it's actually part of the electric pillar tree. So now we'll get the Radiance electric pillar red effect that I talked about earlier. Anytime the Radiance is put down, it'll put down 2 electric pillars of its own. And that's how we're going to really push the build into being the broken territory. This is a perfect stage type and stage layout to really show it off into. You can see that everything just spawns in. They pretty much immediately start either dying or getting pulled in to the point of where they die. And then that entire time, as soon as I activate Ragna healing, I also just get a ton of healing output as well. I always like being able to have some of my tactic effects on an automatic source like the Radiance, because I will forget to use my legacy skills a lot of the time. So it's just a nice way of, like, idiot-proofing the build for me. And now that we have the Radiance Red effect, we are pretty much set for the entire rest of the run. Before you have the Radiance Red effect set up, the run is still, the build is still quite strong, but where it really takes off is after getting that red effect, because you can have more total pillars down for the boss fights, for the damage transferring stuff, and then for the regular enemy rooms, you'll just have a constant stream of them down for extra damage output and for pulling enemies in. Enemies are also taking hit stun while they're being pulled in, so as long as they don't have super armor and they have a shadow chain on them and a pillar is down, they basically never have any chance to attack, because the shadow pillars are constantly attacking. And then, like I said before, the shadow pillars even hit themselves, so even if enemies aren't in range to be taking damage from the pillars, they will be taking damage from the damage transfer from the shadow links. The one thing I wish they would change about this is that, well, first of all, I think they're definitely going to have to nerf it, so Ragna's second legacy skill doesn't allow you to heal off the pillars, because it's just way, way too strong. And then, the other thing I would like to see them change is, you can damage the pillars with the Shadow Red effect, but you cannot ever debuff pillars. Which is a problem, because I wanted to try and run builds where I would put, like, Venom or Burning debuffs on them, and then have the debuffs transfer between all the enemies at once. I think that'd be a fun type of build to run. I want to pick up Stable Mark as my upgrade for Holy Mark. Stable Mark is pretty overpowered, and it makes Holy Marks just so much better as a tactic. Normally, Holy Marks will break when you damage them once, but Stable Mark basically just turns them into a duration effect instead. As long as that duration is still active, you can hit the holy marks as many times as you want, and then it will constantly deal the damage that the holy mark would do. It's significantly reduced damage, but it's still much higher damage output than trying to put the holy marks back on the enemies each time you hit them. Especially once if you're able to get the ascensions for that holy mark upgrade, the damage that you lose from it doesn't actually become that high. It becomes 20% at gold, if I remember right. We have a bunch of extra money at this point saved up, but then if I ever get a shop that's giving me a high amount of potentials, and maybe I'll buy an extra HP or two. Look at his HP, by the way. Kokonoe does deal very high DPS on her own, but this type of damage output is not normal. Especially because I'm running Frost Skill, and then I'm also just using my attacks there. I'm not even proccing the Frost Burst or anything. That type of damage output with like a Frost attack build in Radiance might deal somewhat similar damage output, but I think this Shadow Pillar build is even dealing higher DPS outputs than what that would do. That'd be something I'd have to compare side by side, though. We could take this again. I've been trying to figure out how this one works. I don't think it quite works the way I would want it to, but that's something I can test out mid-run. So let me try and drain a bunch of my MP, and then see if... I think the way that this works is that it gives you a bunch of MP back whenever your combo actually drops. It doesn't give you like a constant stream of MP every time you hit the 60 that you need. Where is it? So yeah, let's dump a bunch of mana here and we should be able to... Actually, I don't know if the combo will drop since the stage is cleared. But what it says is for every 60 hit combo, you restore 75 NP. But I think that MP doesn't actually activate until the combo counter drops. It's the same way for like... Do I have it even? It's the same way for one of these, like, combo health regen buffs that you can get. You don't actually get the health until the combo drops. I noticed it in the previous video because my combo dropped randomly somewhere, and I just had like a million... I had a million orbs all of a sudden, and I didn't know why. But when I was rewatching the video and looking at the footage, it was when my combo dropped. So I'm thinking that's probably how this works. Let me drop my MP really low here real quick, and then take a hit on purpose. Take a hit on purpose. Hit me, please, hit me! Like I said before, if you have the pillars down, and I also had my laser down there too, which was helping, but it becomes very hard for enemies to actually ever play the game. They're just going to be locked in hit stun constantly. So normally I only take one shot per area, but since we have so much bonus money saved up, I'm going to go ahead and take an early one. And then I can always just not take the final shot later if I do end up able to spend my money here. What I mean by that is that whenever you get to stage 8 of the area, there's always a guaranteed shop right before the boss fight. If you're playing on the beginner difficulty, that'll be at stage 7 instead of stage 8, but it's a rule between both modes. And then the shop will always be at the top selection here. So even if your options are hidden, you can always guarantee the top one is going to be a shop space once you're on stage 8. We still have 4 minutes left on the timer, and we only have 4 more rooms left to go, so I think I'm fine going with the exchange points here. If I was playing at 80 entropy to be able to get the 3rd Sortisho reroll, I might be a little more tempted to go Sortishos. Otherwise, I don't get a whole lot of value out of them, usually. It's of course random, but a lot of the Sortisho rewards aren't stuff that I really want, aside from maybe some extra max HP or max MP. Because of the 20% scaling damage bonus from potentials that I talked about earlier, potentials kind of become king if you ever want to just scale your damage as high as possible. Your tactic setup will help, but your character damage will usually end up outscaling most tactic builds, if you're able to get a high amount of potentials, that is. This is mostly something that applies to high entropy, where you have a lot of shop refreshes and can make more money, that type of thing. You can stack way more potentials than you can in low entropy stuff. So right now, already, you can see I have a 360% damage modifier to my character. Unfortunately, that damage modifier doesn't apply to tactics or anything. It's the same thing for if you're taking mind crystals that give you extra damage increases. Most damage modifiers in the game don't scale tactics damage. There are a couple exceptions to that, like Ragna's second legacy skill and Rending Impact, the upgrade for Rend. So the reason why I wanted to put Holy Marks into this build is that they have an upgrade called Mark Resonance. So when the Holy Mark on an enemy is triggered, the Holy Marks on other enemies are also triggered. This kind of does a similar thing to the Shadow Chains, where when I'm dealing damage to one enemy, it's dealing spreaded out damage to all the other enemies at the same time. And then this should also get amplified by the Mark's damage transfer again. Let me go over the whole build from top to bottom again one more time, now that we have everything put together. And since this is it's a lot more complicated of a build than a lot of things. So the build starts out with Attack Shadow Mark, or you could take it on Skill Shadow Mark as well. I just prefer Attack. When you attack enemies, you apply a Shadow Mark to them, and then when you attack enemies that are marked by the Shadow Mark, they transfer a portion of their damage over to enemies. Over to every single enemy that is marked. This damage transfer also gets multiplied, so if I'm hitting one boss enemy and 2 other enemies, the boss is going to be taking this additional damage transfer 2 times, 1 for each enemy. And then to help out with the Shadow Chains, we inherited Shadow Chain Tether. It's important to inherit this if you're going to run the exact same build as me, because you want to take a Summoner effect down here. And then this applies to most tactics. It doesn't apply to all of them, or red effects, I mean. Most of the red effects, you just need to have one single... You need to have one single tactic filled. So, for this example, I don't actually need the Shadow Tentacles as a Summoner tactic in order for this to be active, if I inherit it. That's something unique you can only do through inheriting, though. So we have the Shadow Chain Tether, which, if enemies don't have super armor, it just constantly drags them together. That's mostly, it's an optional thing if you just want high DPS out of the build for boss fights, but it does help out a lot when it comes to pulling enemies together for normal stages. And then we have Summon Radiance and Radiance Electric Pillar to summon more pillars. This is just going to increase the damage output that we deal during boss fights by a large amount, and then also just help with a constant flow of pillars for normal rooms. And then what makes everything come together is Shadow Chain Electric Pillar. This not only makes it where the electric pillars come with their own shadow chains, so it also makes it where they can be damaged, and you can enable the damage transfer by attacking them. So this is where our damage multiplier is coming from in boss fights. We're creating 2 pillars through Legacy, and then we're creating 2 pillars through here, and we're effectively dealing 40% extra damage on the boss fight, since we're transferring around 10% of that damage to the boss when hitting them. 10% for each pillar, I mean. Also, what this does is it makes the pillars themselves deal a lot more damage and provide a lot more utility in normal rooms, because the pillars can also damage themselves, which is also constantly helping to pull in enemies and also deal damage to enemies that aren't in the range of the electric pillars themselves. The electric pillars by default have very low actual damage range from where they can hit enemies. The enemies have to be basically on top of them usually. So this not only makes them a very strong crowd control tool, they'll constantly also put enemies into hit stun from hitting them either by when they get pulled in or just through the shadow tethers. But then they're also dealing a pretty good amount of DPS constantly, just due to always being able to actually hit enemies and not having to be... They get very weighed down by their limited range when it comes to normal enemy rooms, without the red effect that helps you shadow chain them and also pull them in. Hopefully all of that explanation makes sense. It's, like I said, it's a little bit more of a complicated build than most builds in this game. And then also just trying to explain it during the run without being able to, like, write down my thoughts and everything makes it a little bit trickier to explain as well. But hopefully I did a good enough job of explaining everything. I don't really care about upgrading this too much. It just doesn't feel quite as effective as her other skill options in terms of how much damage you get out of it for how much MP you're spending. I don't really care a whole lot too about, like, any of the next potentials I pick up from this point on. I don't really need them to be using them for their moves. I'm just picking them up to keep increasing the damage modifier. Look! What? Look at that damage! I was about to say, like, okay, so watch the damage output that I deal here, and then I look up at her HP bar and she's just already completely dead. That did more damage than I even expected it to. So one thing we have to do, or we have to keep in mind here, is that I have Perfect Slaughter and I have stacked it quite high. So my character has an additional 240% damage bonus that I wouldn't normally have. So the build is going to look stronger than it would be in a more typical run, but I can also say that I've tested this run out without any additional damage modifiers, and it was still quite strong that way. So I think maybe what I'll do is, I can't take too many rooms here because of my low time limit. Though, I don't think I don't think most bosses are going to last more than 1 to 2 minutes with how we've gotten the build put together. So I don't need to worry as much about timer as I normally would, but I still want to keep it in mind. Also, actually, I could probably just pretty much out-heal the timer with how much HP I get back from hitting all of these pillars simultaneously. It's something it's hard for me to show off during the run, because I'm not really taking a whole lot of damage to begin with, just because of the build, constantly putting everything into hitstun and killing everything so quickly. But I also I don't really want to risk taking a bunch of damage as well. 3k HP, even from if I get hit by like a big group of these Alpha Sector enemies at once, they can easily deal 3k burst damage as well. And then it's the same for a lot of the boss fights in Transcendence. Let me try. Oh, that did no damage. I'm here talking about how enemies in Transcendence can deal high damage, and then that guy just does basically nothing. But you can see a single hit of there did 768. So if I got hit by, like, a bunch of these at once, I could easily take a high amount of burst damage. And then that comes double into play as soon as you get a bunch of debuffs, like Afterlife Bombs is one of the... Afterlife Bombs can very easily burst you down if you have it on top of other enemy attacks. So I'm at about half health here. I can drop both of my pillars down, do a couple of my air attacks, and... Oh look, I'm just suddenly back to full HP in no time. And that's... I could have 2 more pillars and be hitting the boss at the same time on top of that. Also, again, Kokonoe is a little bit of an extreme example. What? Goodbye, I guess. This boss has a very low HP pool to begin with, but that was a very fast kill for Transcendence. Yeah, but Kokonoe is a very extreme example of this healing, because the healing you get out of Ragna's Second Legacy favors multi-hit attacks, and the splashes that I'm generating are doing a very, very high amount of multi-hits. But no matter how you look at it, just being able to amplify the multiplier of Ragna's healing, which is already strong even on a single target, by 4, you just get an insane amount of healing. I'm actually pretty decently close to reaching all potentials on a single run, which is not very common without having a specific luck on stuff like trials and black markets. If you're going for all potentials, you want the Covenant effect. That gives you an additional +2 rerolls on the shops. And then you want a similar setup like this, where you start with the buffs that make you additional money, speedrun reward, and no damage reward. And then on top of that, you also want the Mind Crystal that gives you additional money on perfect clearing boss fights. And you just want to stack as much money as possible and use all of the shop refreshes to search for potentials. That's the best way to get full potentials on a character. I have a whole guide detailing all of that type of thing, as well as a method of... You can manipulate the... Oh, goodbye. I'm never gonna get stop getting surprised of just how much damage output I'm dealing. But yeah, I have a guide. If you look down in the description, you can find all my guides. I have a guide that details every single thing you want to do in order to set up runs for getting full potentials. We might actually hit a full potential character. I have one more exchange space left, and then I do have one from Reki that I can get as well. So if I get decent luck on the shop space, I think I might actually be able to get a full potential character for the first time without ever having the broken Covenant effect that I talked about before for extra refreshes. And the fact that I'm also doing it without having the exchange points on perfect killing bosses is pretty good as well. I don't have that, and then I also don't have... There's a black market that gives you additional money when perfect killing spaces. That also will give you a ton of extra money to spend at shops. So basically, if I'm able to hit full potential character without having any of that broken stuff, it's a really good, it's a really rare thing to see, and it's a really good sign for the Transcendence buffs that they gave us. You wouldn't think one additional shop refresh would make that big of a difference, but once you start thinking of it as it's an additional shop refresh for every single shop you see, and you're guaranteed one shop through each section, and then 3 shops in Omega Sector, so it adds up a long ways for getting extra potentials. We have 1minute and 35 on the timer left, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the exchange, and then I'm going to go into Reki, and then Susanoo. Probably not the best idea, but I'm strong enough that I feel like even if the timer does run out between them, I should be able to heal it back. I was not actually paying enough attention to the shops there to... I'm so used to just glancing for either discount or... I'm so used to just glancing for discount or potentials that I might have skipped some HP increases throughout this run. Even though I should have probably bought a couple more. Let's go this for some just extra safety. We have the damage output we need. Basically, the only thing that can stop me is being one shot at this point. So... Oh wait, I still have another exchange space available. I thought I had already taken 2 of them, but I guess not. Did I? I actually managed to kill her so fast that I got her second phase instantly. That's not the easiest thing to do, because once she hits a certain threshold, she gets locked into... Whoa! Our damage output is just completely insane. This type of damage output is, or this type of boss killing speed is what I expect out of normal runs. This is not typical at all as a killing speed for Transcendence mode. Transcendence bosses get significantly tankier, and I've never seen them die this quickly. So again, I want to mention this a couple times, just so people don't take the run out of context. I have a 350% or a 315% damage modifier, which is massive, and it's contributing a lot to these one-shots. I still think it's really cool to show off, but I don't want people to get the wrong idea about... The tactics themselves are very, very strong, but a lot of what's contributing to the damage is just the broken effect that we have there, giving us an insane damage increase. That being said, I am still just completely baffled by the sheer amount of damage we're dealing here. He lasted maybe a second or two. This is probably the craziest run I've ever had in all of my time playing Entropy Effect. And I am nearing 1,000 hours into this game, as crazy as that is to say. Ooh, wow. Wait a minute. What the? I only have one refresh here. That ain't right. Did they, like... Did they nerf it? Oh, no. Oh, no. Oh, no. Oh, no. I wonder if people have been pointing this out the entire time. I've not been on Transcendence mode. Oh no. I've been talking about Transcendence mode this whole time. That makes it even stranger that I was able to get close to full potentials without the extra refresh. Hey guys, post-commentary Fury here again. I ended up cutting off the recording very abruptly without doing the outro, since I wasn't sure if I was going to upload this or not, but with how good of a run it ended up being, I wanted to upload it anyways. So thank you guys for bearing with the mistake of me mentioning Transcendence throughout the entire run, and it not actually being on. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.